The meeting of the Thursday, September 30th, 2021 Capital Funding Protection Committee meeting to order. Starting with roll call, please.
Devin Reese.
Here.
Oscar Delgado is absent. Charlene Bybee. Here. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Bob Lucy is absent. Jeannie Herman, not here yet. Justin Ivory.
Here.
Andrew Diss.
Here.
Elise Bonkowski, absent. Sophia Cardinal.
Here.
Dave Solero.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 2. Do we have any public comment cards signed up for any of the items on the agenda today?
We do not.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on you in case someone wanders in. Thanks. So let's move to item 2.01, which is approval of the minutes for the August 5th, 2021 meeting of Capital Funding Protection Committee. Is there a motion? Motion from, Member Reese.
Second.
Second from Vice Chair Ivory. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Item 2.02, information and discussion on the anticipated cadence and workload of the future meetings of the Capital Funding Protection Committee for the 2021-22 school year. Mr. Searcy.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Searcy, Chief Facilities Management Officer for the school district. This is a standing item just to kind of keep everybody on pace with what is anticipated for the committee to discuss in the coming months, as we meet only every other month. So omitting this afternoon's agenda, we're going to fast forward to our next potential regularly scheduled meeting, December 2nd, where we anticipate providing a calendar year annual accountability report as required by our board policy that establishes this committee. And we also anticipate a substantial, a thorough update on the design progress, estimated costs, and schedule associated with the W. Smith CTE Academy High School. That will be for information and discussion only at that time. The annual evaluation report will be for action. So moving into 2022, we would like to bring a preview of the 5-year CIP for discussion and input as early as February. So look forward to that. Then we will have a larger item, hopefully for action, related to the construction phase funding allocation request or recommendation for the full construction phase of the W. Smith CTE High School. That's on schedule for February coming up. And by the way, hopefully you guys recall the video that we saw last time we met on W. Smith. Our communications department put some interviews and really produced that and put that out on social media. It really looks spectacular, and looking forward to these future meetings and give you guys a full detailed update on the progress there. So into April, we'll bring a major projects update and then potentially for action the 5-year CIP, pending the conversation and input in February on that 5-year CIP. I also put into April, this is the Oversight panel for school facilities, which requires a every other year update to the legislature, and that should be a quick one, but it's all good news. So we'll cover that in April when we get there. I put that in for my own, every other year you tend to forget to do it. But then into June, we're into right before the fiscal year, right? So we'll anticipate the fiscal year plan approvals, and those are a little bit more routine. Last year, the capital renewal plan, this will be our annual capital renewal plan like we've done every fiscal year. We'd plan to bring that for action in June next year. And then last year, you may recall a separate item related to the IT device refresh plan. We would anticipate following a similar format. So that's, right before the next fiscal year, we'd bring it in June, and then to the school board right before the start of the fiscal year. Kind of looking a little bit further out, I am hopeful that you will all be joining us at a number of really exciting ceremonies around that time. We'll see if we have a meeting or if we all just want to go out and enjoy some ribbon cutting ceremonies. And then, potentially, I try to stretch this out as far into the future as possible, but I anticipate the conversation around the 5-year CIP including a bit of discussion about core school investments. That's a theme that is going to be reoccurring in our meetings as we go forward. And so I just kind of wanted to put that out there as a marker that this is something that we're going to be delving into in more depth and detail with this committee. So I put that in there more as just a commentary about what the look ahead looks and feels like for this committee. So that's kind of the quick look ahead. We've definitely got some big annual action and some action hopefully on the construction phase funding for Debbie Smith in the immediate horizon. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Mr. Searcy on that item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2.03, presentation and update on the implementation of recommendations from the external audit of the Washington County School District's Capital Improvement Program. And Mr. Searcy, it looks like Mr. Starkey are here for this one.
Sure, I'll open with this. You all have in your packet and up on the screen here is the memo that was sent at the end of August related to a question and discussion that occurred at our last meeting. You may recall we presented an update related to our implementation progress on some recommendations stemming from the audit. And there was a good discussion and a couple of really excellent questions that we promised to get back to the committee on. This memo was sent on August 30th to all of the committee members. And in discussions with the chair and vice chair, we wanted to put it on the agenda, create a record, and have an opportunity just to discuss any of the content of this response. I certainly won't read it to you. This basically describes what I just said, how we heard this at our last meeting. There was some questions asked, and this is a detailed response. Basically, the question related to whether or not the scope of the audit included the expenditures of WC1 funds on professional services. And the answer to that question in general was no. It focused almost exclusively on construction phase related expenditures. And so that was more of a point of clarification that we were not certain on at the time during the meeting. And then it goes on to explain in a fair bit of detail the purchasing, the procurement, purchasing, and professional services contract execution and management that the school district holds ourselves to, whether it's through NRS, board policy, or just internal processes where we have different thresholds for contract execution, approval authority, contract amendment approval authority, and so on and so forth. So that's a really quick summary of what this memo includes. We've got our chief internal auditor and our director of purchasing and contracts here if we want to have any more discussions. But that's really what this item is intended to bring about. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Searcy or anyone else? Member Ivory.
Yeah, I got to ask. So during the meeting, when this question was posed to Mr. Starkey, he had mentioned that, yes, it was audited, and he was under the impression that those items were covered in the audit, only to go back and find out later that they weren't. It seems to me, and maybe I'm the only one up here that feels this way, but it seems to me as though these items should definitely be audited, only because when the auditors go so deep as to look into the subcontractors and then make a record or make an outcome that the subcontractor doesn't work for the owner, therefore is kind of excluded from that, then it tells me that they went at least and looked into the process of which a subcontractor is awarded. I find it kind of weird that, or odd, I guess, that it doesn't include the professional services. When I mean professional services, I'm talking the architect, the engineer, the scope of the schedulers. I know there's a lot of different aspects to it that I feel like are probably out there. The construction manager contract, all those things. And I think personally, I think it'd be worth going back, maybe taking another bite of the apple, getting a complete full report so that we all feel good about the complete outcome, would be my 2 cents.
Any other questions, comments on this? I do notice it is not for action, it's just for information and discussion, so we may have, some future item to discuss that point, brought up by Vice Chair. But,
I have a quick question.
go ahead.
Sophie Cardinal, for the record. I wasn't here when this was initiated, but didn't the committee agree on the procedures that the auditor was supposed to take for this? And wouldn't it have been discussed at that time if we should look at construction costs or professional services?
I'll take a stab at that and then allow Mr. Starkey to correct me. I will mostly add that the process to determine select the auditor and determine the scope took a considerable amount of time. Between us meeting only every other month, between some interactions between the audit committee of the school district and the capital funding protection committee, between the actual turnover of the school district's internal auditor and desire to wait until Mr. Starkey was hired, things of that nature, was a bit protracted process. So there was some turnover, some maybe institutional knowledge kind of lost, went by the wayside. But I think the answer to your question is yes, that ultimately the scope was obviously settled upon and contracted for. So I don't know, Kirk, if you could add to that.
Oops. Kirk Starkey, Chief Auditor. Thanks for the question. Basically, when I came on, I was meeting with district leadership, members of the board. There was a person, I asked for someone to be assigned from Capital Funding Protection Committee and the Audit Committee, and we went through the whole of what is everyone asking for in the community. And the big thing was construction costs. And that's what we decided to focus on. That became the scope, and then we sat down with a member of this committee and a member of the audit committee, and we compiled the procedures to be performed in between, and that's what went out to the public to get a outside third-party auditor to do the job. And that was the other thing. The big thing is they wanted, the board wanted someone outside of our office to do the audit, and so it went out that way, but based upon the input of this committee, audit committee, and myself. And that's what it focused on was construction costs. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah, please.
I'm wondering too, like, what is the dollar amount of these professional services versus the construction costs? Because maybe that might ease our concern if it's a small proportion of the total.
Good question. I don't have that one in front, but I can get back to the committee again on. Sorry about that.
No, I put you on the spot, but
I mean,
think-
just speaking in generalities, it's not insignificant. It may be
Okay.
10-15% of the total cost of a project. So if construction project's $100 million, perhaps as much as $10 million might be attributed to those types of professional services.
That is a lot. I think Mr. Ivory makes a good point. I think it's good to look at.
Okay.
We need to, but I also recognize that this audit is done, and a committee had previously agreed to the scope. So I recognize that too.
Thank you. Thank you.
When
Right.
would the next one be? I mean, would we perform another one of these relatively soon into the future?
If the committee desires one, what I have to do is I have to go before the audit committee, ask for basically kind of to amend the audit plan for the year, and then if they okay it, then go to the board, get their own stamp of approval. After that, I would need I'm assuming everyone would want it outside of our office, probably another third-party firm, which is fine, but our internal audit budget is razor thin, so paying for that, I'd have to ask for funds from another bucket of monies.
Well, and on that note, the Capital Funding Protection Committee actually allocated $100,000 for this external audit
Yeah,
previously. So again, if the committee desires, we could take steps in that direction, whether it's internally managed or externally, and develop whatever scope of audit
Yeah.
you guys feel is appropriate.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
One moment, I do have one question. Has the internal audit of the school district done an audit of the purchasing and procurement policies of the school district recently?
I do not believe so.
Okay, I'm just curious,
Yeah, I
because
do.
that might have been a report that's already been done out there that would answer the same question
Yeah.
for us, so, okay. Member Ivory.
Thanks for the answers, by the way. I think it's a lot to digest in kind of a, off the cuff initial. So I guess what maybe I would ask, since it's just an informational thing only, is I would certainly hate to think that we would be not receive all the information that maybe we were looking for, only because maybe it was missed on a question 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago when this audit was asked for. I know I wasn't on the committee when the questions were brought up. So with that being said, I guess what I'm asking is, could we possibly bring this to the next meeting as maybe an action item on the next meeting? If there's no appetite for it, then I say we let it pass. I think it gives people at least a little bit of time to look into it, to see, hey, how much money are we actually talking about? Do we think it's required? Do we think it's our, responsibility to look into that? And then discuss it at the next meeting. I think it'd probably be the appropriate way to deal with it.
Yeah, I think we can do that without taking any action today, so. Okay. All right, any other
I just
questions?
have-
Yep.
Just one concern, would that delay the whole process if we're waiting for 2 months before we would make a decision on that?
No.
How would that affect the time frame?
No, the external audit that has been conducted is
Okay.
closed.
It's reviewing, it's our ability to review what's in there and decide maybe and I would agree, next time, as we look at that full information, accept it, if we take an action item, to accept it, and then further recommendations as we look at the next audit, maybe that would be, something I would support, that we would look at, here's the information and how we feel about that, and we support that, the external audit, but here's recommendations for further action when we if we do another one. Yeah, we don't even have to decide if we will, but we could make recommendations based on the full information and the action items. So I would support that. Thank you.
So just point of clarification, the external audit that was completed has already been presented and approved by the Capital Funding Protection Committee and the Board of Trustees. The item on last Capital Funding Protection Committee agenda was just an update regarding the implementation of a couple of recommendations stemming from that audit. And that's when the conversation occurred. So we provided this memo to clarify our response from the meeting, which, we agendized for discussion only here today to try to better understand the guidance from the committee. Based on this conversation, we'll work with the chair and vice chair to bring back an item likely for potential action, perhaps with a little bit more specific information related to the scale of professional services, expenditures of WC1 funds relative to the overall scale of the expenditures, things of that nature, possibly some options for another audit. It would be, separate. So I guess to your question, the process related to this audit is essentially complete, and this would be the committee choosing to initiate another process, which is fine. We'll talk about that at a later meeting.
Sorry, Justin Ivory for the record. Yeah, just so I'm clear, I'm not asking for a complete new audit of everything. We've got a very thorough audit of everything that was covered in the audit. We got great recommendations back from that audit. All I'm saying is, I think maybe there was just a few holes in the audit that I feel like maybe got missed. And to be honest with you, maybe somebody else sees something if they go back and look at it between now and the next meeting, or maybe they see something else that I don't know. But I just think it'd be worth a revisit to look at the holes maybe that were missed. But I'm only talking, so I'm clear, I'm only talking about those items. I'm not talking about redoing the entire audit.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Starkey.
Thank you.
Mr. Searcy. Take us on to item 2.04, which is a presentation and discussion regarding the budget and cost for the construction of a new elementary school in the southeast Reno area near Rio Wrangler Parkway. Mr. Sears?
Okay, I'm going to start this one off, and also with me is our Director of Design, Teresa Golden, who's going to help me present. This thing's loading up full screen. So in your packets are two attachments, the presentation that I'm going to go through here, as well as the presentation that went before the Board of Trustees this week on Tuesday regarding this potential school. My computer's a little bit upset right now. We'll just kind of let it get caught up. Okay. So this is just a little bit of background, the history of the Rio Wrangler project. We call it Rio Wrangler project because this is a piece of property right off of Rio Wrangler Parkway. We'll show a vicinity exhibit later, but think Damani Ranch High School to get you in the right ballpark. But we've long known that this was an area of growth and an additional elementary school would be needed in this area. It's been master planned into the development in the Damani Ranch area PUD for many years. The school district acquired the property from Nevada Tri-Partners a couple of years ago, and the civil or the mass grading and the structural pad improvements were actually completed as a part of that land acquisition deal by the developer, and we currently own the property outright. So in anticipation of the need for this school, the design phase was approved, the funding was approved by the committee and the board back in 2019, and design was initiated pre-pandemic. And just also for clarification, this is elementary school design similar in nature, basically identical in nature to the three that we've opened to date. Right, so they proceeded with design throughout 2020, and we're essentially ready to move forward with the construction of the project at the end of last school year, but with everything being at the end of basically a year ago, with everything being so up in the air at that time, the decision was really made internally to just hold and wait and see what would occur. So this fall, we've looked very, very closely at a variety of factors, but primarily enrollment and trends of enrollment growth in that area, and have elected to proceed with these recommendations. So moving towards the superintendent, should we or should we not move forward with this construction of the new school? She elected to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees this week, and the attachment that I mentioned earlier was presented and ultimately approved by the board on Tuesday this week to move forward. So I've got just a couple of slides that are excerpt from that presentation this week, and then of course the whole presentation is in your packet. We did present three different options to the Board of Trustees. I think it's very important for this committee to have an understanding that we have a number of options available to us when it comes to addressing overcrowding needs. We did take some time to set the stage, if you will, for the Board of Trustees. Hey, here's where we're at. Here's how we got here. We have, for example, 4 portable classrooms at Polaquitas today. We have 5 portable classrooms at Brown Elementary School today. Those are the 2 schools who would be primarily relieved by the construction of this new school. Also, Double Diamond Elementary is down in the area. So, are there options to add portables, for example? Are there options to rezone? And of course, wait and see would possibly include adding portables. Those options were considered, as well as a fair amount of discussion about enrollment trends and projected growth. As much as our crystal balls have been impaired in the last 18 months regarding what's going to happen in the future, we have a lot of information that is pointing us towards the superintendent's recommendation to proceed with initiating construction. I made it very, very clear to the board that means only that we would take this item then to the CFPC and not presume the construction to begin, that there's a number of steps that need to occur, but getting board direction to initiate this process was really what the ask was. This was maybe the most impactful, one of the more impactful slides from the presentation. This is an exact excerpt, but the punchline for me is that the combined enrollments at these three schools, this graphic speaks of Brown Elementary, Double Diamond, and Poliquetas. You can see the combined enrollments in the blue bars, and of course these are projections going forward. And this is the combined capacity, the maximum capacity. So currently today we are just over maximum capacity across those three schools. If you look at the presentation from the board meeting, you can see they're not equally distributed. There's geographic boundaries. You know, kids don't come in nice, neat packages. They don't sit still, the whole 9 yards. But any rezoning scenario, when the combined enrollments exceed the combined capacities, there's really no resolving the overcrowding. Poliquetas today is at about 120% of capacity with 4 portables. Brown is about at 105, 108% of capacity with 5 portables. And Double Diamond is in the high 70s. So they actually have no portables. They're at really an optimal level of population. So we did show a hypothetical rezoning scenario. Say if we pulled some kids out of Poliquetas, we talked about the disruption to families that would cause. But just to be thorough, to illustrate, hey, this is an option, and let the board have an opportunity to consider it. We put all of that in front of the board, including this slide specifically and others that talked about the projected enrollment. Where do those numbers come from? We talked about Daybreak development and the status of their probable groundbreaking this school year and what that would likely entail from a timing standpoint, enrollment generation, things of that nature. And ultimately, as I said, they made a motion to support the superintendent's recommendation to proceed with construction. So I would just really wanted to paint that picture for this committee so there was an understanding of the sort of diligence that went into the information that we're about to present. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Teresa now to walk you through from the 5,000 foot level all the way through the very, very detailed aspects of the recommendation.
Thanks, Adam. So our new Rio Wrangler site, in my personal opinion, is really one of the best elementary school sites that we've seen thus far. It's got really great access. It overlooks the wetlands on the north, really great view from the playgrounds, and around those wetlands in that neighborhood. I don't know if you've been down there, but if you have, there's a walking path that goes all the way around that area. And so in regards to pedestrian and biking access for the school, it's really a great site. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So delving in a little bit deeper, the main vehicular access to the school, we've got 2 main roads. That top road on the west is Green Pastures, and the bottom one is Stepping Stone. And those 2 roads are 2-way traffic, 2-lane, all the way into the school. And those 2 roads also have sidewalks on both sides of the street, which is great for the kids to get to school. And it creates really this really nice loop for student drop-off in front of the school. And then on the bottom or the east side of the school that you see sort of on the bottom right, we have a separate bus loop there for student drop-off for the buses, which of course we always prefer for safety reasons. We're also proposing right in this area on the east side to connect to this neighborhood on the bottom, a culvert bridge to connect pedestrians through this path here. That has not been approved yet. That needs a separate approval from the city. We have to take it for a master site plan review and take it to the planning commission, but that is something that we're going to try and accomplish and is in our set of drawings right now to make this connection. Again, just to alleviate traffic and to increase the pedestrian traffic from that neighborhood. Another thing I wanted to note is you see that housing development right there in the center. The really nice thing about that development is the backyards are actually what sit on those roads. So we don't have a bunch of driveways that are going to impede traffic on those two main roads. So that's really nice. It's really just going to be kind of a nice green belt along that area. And then the offsite improvements that we're looking at doing on Rio Wrangler itself is to extend the turn pockets onto Stepping Stone there, both from the north or east and west sides. And then the addition of the pedestrian flashers. So we've got one at the intersection there of Stepping Stone, and then another one that's going to be a little bit further west of Green Pasture. And the reason that's a little further west is because there is a median that goes down the center of Rio Wrangler, so that you can't have a crossing there. So, which leads me to the point of when we are pulling out of Green Pasture right here, it is a right turn only because of that median. So that is a slight drawback, but so this pedestrian flasher is up here at that next intersection. As Adam talked about, we did acquire this land from Nevada Tribe Partners. It is a 9-acre site, so it's a nice site, and I think he also mentioned that they did provide our building pad for us. So we are installing our typical prototype design, same as our last 3 new schools. We're calling it our double L design because we can't seem to come up with a better name. But wanted to talk a little bit about the unique changes, not only for the building, but for the site as well. And the first one is we are going to be adding a shade structure in the backyard playground that will include some picnic tables. We think it's important to try and provide a little bit more shade for those kids in the back. We just did talk about the off-site improvements on Rio Wrangler and that proposed pedestrian bridge. But the next item is we are installing a hybrid HVAC system at this site, which is unique to this site. The last 3 sites we've done so far are a strictly 100% geothermal system. And at this particular site, the ground is much hotter at Rio Wrangler. So because of that, we had to put in a cooling tower to provide that sort of temperate water for the HVAC system. So that is why we need to do a hybrid system at this site. And the last item is a window system change. The window systems that we've been specifying are, I guess you could call maybe a semi-custom system because we are trying to provide so many things within our windows in these schools. But we've been working on that efficiency and that design, and so we feel like that's a better cost-effective approach for us while still maintaining the safety features that we want to include. That bottom table that you see there is some additional information that was recommended we include as part of the 2020 audit that you guys were just recently talking about. They asked us to include some information in regards to square feet per student from our other similar elementary schools. So we went back to our oldest school type, which is what we call our baby boomer school. We've got the square footages for basically all of our school sites, and you can see from the baby boomer, our square foot per student has really almost doubled. And there's a couple reasons for that, and the first really is kind of simply building codes have changed, and probably primarily in regards to ADA. You know, ADA requires a lot more square footage for various different spaces in the building. But probably the bigger driver in that is our education specs that we are currently designing our new schools around for this 21st century learning. And, you know, so it requires a lot more spaces, different types of spaces, such as our student hubs, our group rooms. You know, we're adding separate PTA kitchens, community rooms, and our student hubs as well. So it's really, that is the main driver, is the education specs and the requirements for the space to provide those. So on to our schedule. This is going to be a hard bid project awarded to a single general contractor. We have been working really hard to make improvements to our construction drawings, implementing changes and lessons learned in the past 3 elementary schools. So we feel really good about our set of drawings going into this process. And so our schedule, if this committee approves this project and if it goes to the board and gets approved, our plan is to go straight into the city for a building permit, as well as going straight into bidding. Awarding in early January, looking at about a 15-month construction schedule with a substantial completion in May of 2023 and opening the school in August of 2023. So I did want to talk about those scope changes that we just recently discussed, and those impacts on the budget. So we've listed those here, and as you can see, ultimately, we are looking at a deduct in the scope of about $850,000. The main driver for that is that hybrid HVAC system, which is saving us a significant amount of money up front. And so you're probably saying, well, how come we don't do that at all of our sites? And really the main reason is, we've done a lot of analysis on the geothermal systems versus the conventional HVAC systems. And long-term, utility and maintenance costs, we see that they're better costs in the long run versus a conventional HVAC system. So as we see this savings long-term, it's better for the school district. Market impacts on the budget. I'm sure that you have all heard about and or experienced yourselves all of the impacts that we're seeing on the community in regards to labor, supply chain challenges, and material costs. And we have really great companies that we work with that are professional estimators, and they're telling us that they're going to see those impacts through well into 2022. We did not, we typically do get a third-party detailed estimate from these companies. This time around, we did not, really because we just didn't have the time to do so. We wanted to get this packaged in front of you guys as soon as possible because we think the sooner we bid this, the better price we're going to get. But we did receive some good recommendations from them, and their recommendation is to attach a 10 to 16% escalation in cost based on our last elementary school construction project. So that is what we have done for our recommendation for Rio Wrangler. So this is our proposed allocation for Rio Wrangler. But there's a lot of additional information that we've put on this slide to share with you today. And again, it is also as a result of some recommendations from that 2020 external audit. They asked us to provide some comparisons on our initial approved budgets versus our actual budgets. So what we've done is shown each school here, the new schools that we've done in the past couple years, showing the approved allocation and then the actuals. And so if you go over to the far right column in the right, our actual total construction phase costs have consistently come in under our approved budgets. And so we're pretty proud of that. And I would also like to point out that those additional funds that, remain in those accounts, if you will be recycled and be used for future bond projects. So getting back to our proposed Rio Wrangler allocations, we are recommending a $36.8 million straight construction budget. Let me back up just to explain a little bit. Typically, we're provided an allocation in 3 buckets: construction, professional services, and the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So the recommendation from our cost estimator was 10 to 16%. So what we did was we took 15% on top of in-SCEP actual construction costs for our Rio Wrangler allocation recommendation. For professional services and FF&E, we did take 15% on top of the bow hatch actuals. And the reason we did that is because in-SCEP is not totally built out or totally complete yet. In-SCEP is complete and occupied, but typically for construction projects this size, they're not totally built out and totally finished for 6 to 8 months oftentimes. So we are much more comfortable using the increase over the bow hatch actuals in this case. So our total recommendation is $41.8 million. for Rio Wrangler that includes a 10% escalation and a 5% owner contingency. And again, this is going to be competitively bid and awarded. I think the last thing I did want to point out as well is that in our 5-year CIP, our request for this elementary school was a $40 million budget. And so 41.8 million, we feel very comfortable with this number in regards to the recommended escalation from our estimators. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead.
Just when I was wondering the thought process, why you're thinking you're going to see a reduction in competitive bids. As you put, reduced contractor availability. I mean, so I'm assuming that means fewer bids and a higher price. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Well, I think in general, they're seeing challenges in getting bids from contractors. We have had a number of conversations with our local contractors in town. You know, it all depends on timing for them, right? And we feel like we're going to get a pretty good, we hope anyway, a pretty good turnout on bidding for this project.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Paul Anderson for the record. So I just wanted to make sure, reduced contractor availability, what you're talking about is it's going to take longer. I guess I'm misunderstanding the statement then.
I think some of the drivers associated with the market escalation is attributed to labor availability, compounded by market activity. Some of the general contractors who we've worked with on other projects have indicated extremely full workloads in 2022 already. So while we have been discussing this very publicly with a variety of large general contractors in the community, making them aware of this potentially upcoming opportunity, we have been getting feedback that, you know, there may be some challenges as far as certain subcontractors' availability to aggressively participate in this. That's really just a bullet point that helps speak to the market escalation that we're factoring into our budget recommendation. That said, you know, this is will be the fourth time that we have advertised this exact school for construction bidding. All the lessons learned, many improvements in just subtle improvements in the document's clarity, in the constructability, have been incorporated time and time again. And we feel, and I feel the public works contracting industry feels, that this is actually a relatively low risk and attractive opportunity for them to bid. You know, it's over $30 million construction project, so not everybody's going to be able to compete for that. But that this is an opportunity that we'll see multiple bidders on. And we did see multiple bidders on the last one as well. So I think hopefully that adds a little bit of context and clarity to what that bullet point was intended to imply.
Yeah, so I was curious on, this is obviously K through 5, which is our elementary school, all the new schools, well, all the schools, K through 5. What do you estimate enrollment, and then what is capacity, maximum capacity of this school?
Is that that?
Yeah, we did put together a projection for consideration in the school board's presentation, and this was based on, you know, representative enrollments subject to the zoning advisory committee's determination, and of course projections. These schools all have a rated maximum capacity of approximately 682 students, as you said, K through 5. And we are projecting opening day enrollment in the 82% range of that maximum, or approximately 556 students K through 5. And again, that's school year 23-24, so August 2023. Some growth continuing across those 4 schools for the foreseeable future. And Longer term into the future, we anticipate and have master planned another elementary school in the Daybreak development. But there's enough students in this area, Southeast Reno, across these 3 schools to appropriately populate. I mean, we're not going to be at 50%, something like that. So we've got it about 82% on opening day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a couple things. Yeah, it actually, if I'm seeing this right, Adam, when we open this school in 2023, it looks to me like this committee will probably be looking at when we're going to build the next one, because it's probably going to go right on the tail of it, looking at your enrollment growth and projections, if I'm seeing this correctly. If I'm dividing this up by 3 schools, it just looks to me like come 2024, 2025, we're going to kind of see this line in the same spot, moved up 1 building.
So, just for the fun of it, let's go back to, I assume you're looking at this guy?
Unless I'm starting, my eyes maybe aren't as good as, are we starting much higher than 0?
So,
Yeah, starting at 1,800, so
if we
maybe,
add this school, this yellow line will go up to 2,600, right, 2,650. This is the combined maximum capacities of 3 schools,
yeah,
about 2,000. We built this school, it's now 2,650, and we're up in here.
okay, so it's going to give us some breathing room
Yep,
in South Meadows.
yep.
Okay, well, that's good news. I guess, I just feel like, maybe because I'm the construction guy, I guess, on the committee, my biggest red herring would be joists right now are, it's my understanding, if you place your order for open web joists today, you'll be on the schedule for October of next year. So I know a lot of design companies right now, and it used to be, people would talk about, oh, you're quite a ways out. Well, unless you want to pay expedite fees and stuff like that, there's not even expedite fees offered at this point. And I don't know how it's figuring out. I know open web joists or wide flange beams have not gone up significantly like tube steel and plate steel. But I know that there's a lot of general contractors out there right now looking at the design process of switching it over. I don't know if that's an option, but when I look at your construction schedule, if you cut loose procurement in January, it's going to be awfully tough if you can't put a roof on. So that would be my only other 2 cents.
Yeah,
And then,
agreed. I mean, we'll definitely have to look at that. I mean, at opening, right?
Right.
And have that conversation immediately, because we've had experienced that exact thing at Swope right now, the expansion we're doing. We had to completely change our structural roof design from open web to steel joists, and it
Oh,
cost
did you? Okay.
time and money.
yeah, okay. And then the only other thing that I don't know is because you guys already have a design, I don't know if it's feasible for us to, if you wanted to bring it back to us in 2 months, whether or not, because I don't know, but I don't know if you can actually purchase or at least provide a purchase order to your joist company so you could buy the joists outright yourselves, and then whatever contractor built them, put them in. It's just a thought, only because I think we have a little more freedom to at least get our earmark a time frame in the schedule, maybe, is all I would say. And then my only other question, I feel like we wouldn't be talking about a new school if I didn't mention. So obviously this is a hard bid project. Are we, where are we at staff-wise? Are we going to be overseeing the building of this, or are we going to be hiring an outside consulting firm, like a construction manager firm, to do the oversight on this school?
We are planning on hiring a construction management team.
Okay,
Absolutely. Partly also because we are managing our capital renewal projects as well. We have a really large maintenance program this year, double almost than what we did last year. And so, our staff's going to be extremely busy.
I would like to add the professional services budget recommendation here of $2 million includes professional services consultants such as geotechnical engineers, special testing and inspection for structural aspects of the project. It does include a budget for staff augmentation, construction management, support for on-site full-time management and inspection. It also includes staff time, school district staff time. So we have several construction managers on staff who have extensive experience with these schools in particular. So we are, slightly reducing the level of support necessary from a consultant standpoint as we become more and more familiar with constructing these schools. But ultimately, it's really a staff augmentation issue where, we just don't have enough in-house staff to appropriately manage and observe or supervise the construction of a new school.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess my final one would be, you had mentioned that we got several bids on the last school. I was just curious, I know on one of them we didn't, but I don't know, is that the one before the last one that we didn't? And then the last one, how many did we get on the last, how many general contractors?
Yeah, great question. On Bohatch, we did only receive one responsive bid for that one, and so that was challenging for a few different reasons. On Inskeep, we received two responsive bids, and we're able to award. Coincidentally, Q&D Construction actually has successfully won and constructed all three of our schools to date. But as I said, we've been pretty active with our preliminary conversations across the industry and are very encouraged by the feedback. Anticipate multiple bids for this one again as well.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? Member Dis?
You guys just answered a couple of my questions with Justin. Going back to your scope changes, you got a shade structure on here at 50K. Are you finding as you've built 3 schools that there's add-ons that we're going to have to go back and add to the 3 existing schools because for whatever reason? And can you talk about that?
I think that's very likely. We, of course, you learn as you go, and we've had some requests for some additional shade at those schools, and so we do anticipate most likely going back to those schools to
Okay.
add those.
So you'll probably be bringing some requests in front of us again for those other schools. And then the last one I have is, how often do we look at rezoning in the school district? Every year? Every 5 years? How often does that happen?
Well, so the school district has a zoning advisory committee, not dissimilar from the capital funding protection committee in some ways. It's primarily, they meet monthly throughout the school year or have regularly scheduled meetings, public meetings, again, similar to this committee. I would say that their agenda is primarily motivated by the construction of new schools, which obviously necessitates zoning boundary adjustments, and then secondarily motivated by facility utilization analysis, whether a school or a neighborhood is overcrowded or perhaps underutilized. We're looking at opportunities to maybe better balance our facility utilization. Over the last 5 years, that hasn't been the driving factor. Obviously, we've built a lot of new schools, and that's really been the majority of our focus. But for example, while we haven't met yet this school year, coincidentally, the Clayton feeder, or you were Billinghurst, was that right? I forget, the dominant middle school basketball team.
Yeah, we were pretty dominant. That A team was legendary.
There are some, historical enrollment boundaries that really, for whatever reasons, are no longer particularly logical. We sometimes refer to it as cleanup, and to better align verticals, like, hey, this neighborhood goes to this elementary school, but then this middle school, and we really want to keep those kids together as a class, things of that nature that we try to always continuously improve. Maybe more to your point, they work hard to try to not rezone students more than once in their career at a given level, right? So in this area, some of these students were zoned for Double Diamond and then were rezoned in 2019 to Polakitas. And so that was a part of our conversation. Hey, can we put off building this school through rezoning? You know, the answer was technically yes, but it didn't provide that much relief. But maybe more importantly, it caused a student to have to potentially go to 3 different elementary schools in their elementary school career, which is, you know, undesirable. It's one of kind of the, you know, guiding principles of the committee to try to minimize the amount of times or the, you know, number of times that a student is disrupted like that.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, prior to Tuesday's Board of Trustees meeting where they approved moving forward with construction, did the zoning committee meet and give the Board of Trustees a recommendation not to rezone? Or what was the input that the trustees took into account from the zoning committee prior to that decision?
Well, I think the short answer is no. They're familiar with the zoning process. All of the recommendations from the zoning committee go to the school board. So we talked more in generalities about can we rezone our way out of this problem? Here's the pros and cons associated with that option. And I think they were familiar enough with the pros and cons to make an informed decision about that option. Should they have elected to go with that option, then they would provide direction to staff to go to the zoning committee to try to come up with a rezoning solution. Should we ultimately end up approving to proceed with construction of this school, we'll then be going to the zoning committee to try and come up with the permanent boundaries for this new school zone. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think the evidence is pretty clear that there needs to be a new school with the numbers. I was just wondering what information the trustees themselves were using when they arrived at that decision.
You know, another point, coincidentally, the newest trustee, appointed trustee Beth Smith, was a 4-year member and past president of the zoning advisory committee. So she's very familiar with the details of the process. Really, the input that staff provided to the trustees was I guess we'll call it representative hypothetical rezoning scenario and resulting enrollment numbers, which, you know, as that one slide depict, you know, doesn't solve the problem. Everybody's at 95 to 105% instead of 80 to 120. It balances them out, but it wasn't particularly attractive, and it's very disruptive to families, I think, is the punchline why they gravitated towards this option.
Member Cardinal?
Hi, Sophie Cardinal for the record. Thank you for this information. My kiddos go to Polakitas. I have 2 there, and I think South Meadows is just expanding exponentially. So I'm really happy to hear that this is going forward. I think it will really help. But then this conversation made me wonder, what are the plans for a new middle school in that area? Because you scared me when you said another elementary school is being planned for maybe when Daybreak is done up in that area. But where are they all going to go for middle school? Because I know the one down there, I mean, what's its capacity and what are your plans for middle school?
So I don't have the specific enrollment numbers in front of me right now, but really with the opening of Marcy Hers Middle School up in the Arrow Creek area, the DePoli Middle School in the South Meadows area where these elementary schools matriculate, or rather Brown goes to Marcy Hers, but is very good shape for the long term.
Okay.
So there's no anticipated need for additional middle school capacity in that area, even with the forecasted Daybreak related developments.
I did not realize that Brown was going to hers, so that's good. Okay, thank you.
All right, I've just got one question for you, and this may sound weird from someone from the Funding Protection Committee, but you'd mentioned, Ms. Golden, that you were using a 10% escalation and a 5% contingency on these numbers. As I look at what you've done, then you've taken the actual cost of Inskeep and only added a 10% escalation to that. The recommendation is for a 10 to 16% escalation. The actuals should already have that contingency built into it. So I'm just curious if you're shorting yourself potentially in the future with escalation. So I just want to make sure that, you know, that you're asking for enough to build this school. It's obvious that the school needs to be built. I just hate to have to come back to the, you know, to this committee and the Board of Trustees in the future because we've, you know, misstepped a little bit on kind of that calculation. So just wanted to throw it out there, make sure you're totally comfortable with the total 15% escalation and contingency on this.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Thank you. I anticipate that we can bring it in at that cost. I think the fact that we have been able to maintain our actual construction costs under our approved budgets in the past, that we're confident that that will happen again.
All right, cool. Any other questions on this item? Seeing none, might as well go ahead then and move on to item 2.05, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval of $41.8 million to the 2021-2022 A Major Projects Program and forward the recommendation to the Board of Trustees for approval. Mr. Searcy, Ms. Gold.
Okay, I'll take this one. Let the computer kind of get caught up here. So as we typically set up these agendas, the item we just discussed is for information and discussion only, and this is the action item. I really try to make note of, for the record, the specific program list of projects here. I know it's hard to read on the screen, but this is exactly the program list of projects that was included on the 2016 ballot measure WC1, with the exceptions noted at the bottom, asterisked, added elements that have been added by the committee and the school board since that time. You can always see the total allocated dollar amounts here in this first column in purple. Those are updated as of September 15th, according to actions taken by the committee and the Board of Trustees. This number here, 44.8 million, is inclusive of the previously allocated 3.0 million for the design phase of this project, and in anticipation of the recommendation here today. Also updated every meeting is this total committed column. These are the numbers that are good as of September 15th, 2021. So you can see the actual dollars that have been committed versus allocated. You can see the green and red check marks. So some of these projects that are completely closed out, as Teresa mentioned earlier, the InSkeep project, while substantially complete, may likely see some remaining expenditures coming in the form of FF&E and things like that. But this is substantially complete, and you can see where we landed with actual expenditures on all of these projects. And that really brings us to our recommendation, which, as we just detailed, of a total of $41.8 million for the entire construction phase of this new elementary school in the Southeast Reno area, inclusive of construction, FF&E, and professional services. That's the recommendation. Thank you.
All right, any questions, comments, concerns?
I'll entertain a motion. I'm ready.
I will, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of $41.8 million to the A Major Project Program and for the recommendation to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Second. A motion by Member Dis, second by Member Reese. Is there any public comment on this item as an action item? Any discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay? Oh, sorry. I'm an aye. Just want to make sure that any opposed. Remember, passes unanimously. Sorry about that. Yes. Yeah, well, takes us into section 3, again with public comment. Any public comment for the final public comment?
There's no public comment.
All right. 3.02 is announcement of our next meeting. We will have a meeting December 2nd, unless something else happens and there's no action or something for us. But I'm certain there will be something for us on December 2nd. And then moving on to item 3.03, go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.